graduated from Emory University in Atlanta, then become the site operation manager of Allianz Biomedical Group in Hungary branch. His topic today is pivotal role of coordinator, a key human research protection advocate, training and expertise. Please, Ms. Kasai.
Good morning. Give me 1 second to set up here. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Benjamin Karsai. I'm Site Operations Manager for Allianz Biomedical Group's Hungarian branch, and I'm here today to talk about the incredible importance of the Clinical Research Coordinator and the pivotal role of their training and expertise. So a Clinical Research Coordinator, one who is experienced, well-versed in clinical research, has an exceptional attention to detail, and creates an excellent environment for patient recruitment and retention, is a rare and valuable commodity. These skills require personality types that are not only amicable, yet patient, but meticulous and friendly. And these are not personality types that necessarily go hand in hand. And for a coordinator to be truly independent and effective as a researcher, it takes years of training. And unlike other professions, such as a doctor or a lawyer, there's no school for coordination. And there's very limited access to effective research coordinator training facilities. In this presentation today, I'm going to draw parallels between advantages and disadvantages to doing clinical research in Eastern Europe and Asia. I'm also going to demonstrate how my organization has attempted to overcome challenges in terms of clinical research method and international training program. Finally, I'm going to describe my organization's experience in Eastern Europe and their attempt to overcome cultural, societal, and legal challenges in Hungary and Russia. Essentially, the question I'm going to try to answer today is how do we facilitate access to this rare and valuable commodity that I just outlined? How do we establish access to the coordinator education, training, and expertise around the world? Now, we've discussed this entire weekend that there's many advantages to doing clinical research in Asia, and these advantages are very much paralleled by that of Eastern Europe. China, for instance, has become one of the most attractive markets. It has the largest patient population, and in turn has one of the largest hospital infrastructures. Close to 1.4 million doctors and over 1 million nurses and technicians. Low labor costs also mean that Chinese clinical trials cost about half that of the United States. Russia and Eastern Europe share this combination of low labor costs and a large available patient population. Another major advantage of doing clinical research in Eastern Europe is centralized medical systems. This means that patients with similar symptoms are treated in similar locations. For example, the Török Bálint Pulmonary Institute in Budapest, Hungary is one of 2 locations where COPD, lung cancer, and lung disease patients go for treatment. According to Pharma Focus magazine, this system facilitates patient recruitment and access and allows clinical research sites to recruit patients up to 10 times faster than in the United States. And this has the obvious benefit of slashing both time and money. Now, these advantages have been very much recognized by the pharmaceutical industry. In fact, this entire weekend we've been discussing projections of the rapid movement of clinical research from the West to the East. However, while advantages are parallel between Eastern Europe and Asia, hurdles are also parallel between these 2 regions. There are several hurdles which hamper clinical development in both these regions. The first one is the principal investigator has very limited access to this rare and valuable commodity, which is a very highly trained research coordinator. I'm going to illustrate this point with an example. According to Life Science Reader magazine, China, India, and Eastern Europe have an abundance of patients relative to their clinical activity. In other words, these regions have significantly more patients available that are treatment naive, that smoke, and have chronic lung and heart disease issues. However, for Asia and Eastern Europe to take full advantage of these demographics, Sites functioning within these regions require capacity for high-volume clinical research work. The fact that sites within these regions have had trouble taking greater advantage of these very advantageous demographics suggests a deficit of high-quality and experienced research coordinators who can handle the burden of a high patient volume and study volume. In other words, the volume is available, but the capacity to handle this patient pool is missing. A second major hurdle, which hampers clinical development in both Asia and Eastern Europe, is the method in which clinical research is done. Let me also illustrate this point with an example. In Eastern Europe, clinical research is mostly done by medical department chiefs and sub-investigators who act as coordinators. Now, given the assiduous nature of clinical research, it is very difficult for part-time sub-investigators to provide the attention to detail necessary to successfully conduct a clinical trial. This also raises an ethical issue. How can doctors properly focus on patient safety while laboring over the details of a study protocol? From now on, I'm going to refer to this method of research as the PI, or physician-centered model of clinical research. Through this method, doctors are incredibly limited in their ability to coordinate trials effectively, efficiently, and at high volume. If a PI is responsible for all aspects of a clinical trial, it is very difficult for clinical research sites to benefit from the demographic advantages available in Eastern Europe and Asia. A third major hurdle, which hampers clinical development in both Asia and Eastern Europe, is that of long regulatory approval timelines. Regulatory approval in Russia is 4 months. In China, it's 9 months. This is compared to 4 weeks in the United States. This means that US sites may start patient enrollment 3 months before that of Russia and 8 months before that of China. Now, we've discussed throughout this weekend how we now work on a global stage. In order for sites within Asia and Eastern Europe to remain competitive, they have to have a high volume of patients to make up for this serious delay in regulatory approval. And this in turn calls for experienced coordinators who can handle this high patient volume and who can make up for this lost recruitment time. Now, a high volume of patients is very difficult through a PI-centered model of clinical research. What is required is a method of research in which there's coordinators, multiple coordinators, providing 100% of their attention to the study. And this allows for multiple studies at a time and the capacity to handle a high patient volume. However, this method could only function if a PI has access to highly expert trained coordinators who can handle this patient load and study load. And these skills are very limited to medical personnel within Eastern Europe and Asia. In other words, the conclusion we can draw is that there's no substantial difference between doing studies in emerging regions, such as Asia or Eastern Europe, or the United States. In fact, Asia and Eastern Europe have a demographic advantage. Therefore, the differences can be alleviated if a PI has access to high-quality, trained expert coordinators to assume the burdens of rigorous clinical research work. So how do we make this possible? How do we answer that question I proposed in the beginning, which is facilitating access to this rare and valuable commodity? Before I talk about how that's possible, well, one way is for prominent research facilities to share their expertise around the world. Now, before I go into how we can make that possible, I'm going to talk about something called a coordinator-centered model of research. This is a model of research in which the clinical research coordinator is the center of clinical research operations. They perform the majority of the work. Now, within this model, a PI's role cannot be overstated. It is absolutely key, but a physician is responsible primarily for the well-being of patients and not necessarily for the implementation of complex and time-consuming protocol procedures. It is not a physician's role, for example, to schedule patients, maintain source documents, maintain regulatory, or package labs. And as I mentioned earlier, this raises an ethical issue. How can doctors properly focus on patient safety while laboring over the details of a study protocol? A coordinator-centered model is based on the development of highly developed and professional